Manchester United are one of the most historic clubs in the world of football. They produced the likes of Bobby Charlton, George Best, Roy Keane, Ronaldo, David Beckham, and Wayne Rooney. They've had arguably one of the best managers to ever grace the game in Sir Alex Ferguson, a man who coached his Man United sides to winning 38 total trophies. So you might find it kind of odd that it's been a decade since they've won the Premier League. It's been 6 years since they've won a continental trophy, the last one being the Europa League, and last year was their first trophy in 6 years. And it begs the question, what's gone wrong at Manchester United? Well, with poor ownership, poor managerial appointments, and players that do not play for the badge and play for themselves instead, it creates a very toxic and dysfunctional environment. Now, one man decided to say, that is enough, Man United need to get back to their winning ways. And that man was Senior Gorm. And he is a manager that knows exactly what Manchester United needs, and that is to clean house, where over 30 staff members have already been let go. Some new tactical direction that will hopefully have this side dominating the Premier League in future seasons, and to strip Bruno Fernandes of the captaincy and instill two captains that actually know how to win and know how to get the job done. Not only having £6 million in the transfer budget for the first season, there isn't going to be a whole lot of wiggle room when it comes to money. So I guess without further ado, it's time to get to work. Now, when it came to rebuilding the staff, there was one rule that was to be had, and that was they had to have experience winning. Whether it was as a player, as a manager, as a coach, whatever it may be, they had to have experienced winning in some way, shape, or form. So that saw the likes of Roy Keane join as assistant manager, Teddy Sheringham, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, Ji-Sung Park, Jaap Stam, David Trezeguet, and Pavel Nedved all joined the staff. And another person that joined the staff was Saeed Ouali, who was the head of youth development for Ajax, who oversaw the recent boom in talent coming out of that club. Now, when it came to departures, there was only one major one, and that was Victor Lindelof joining Tottenham for £14 million. So with some more money in the bank, we had to bring in some players. And that saw a young 22-year-old French beast, Khéphren Thuram, join the club, and a 27-year-old mentality monster in Gianluca Mancini join as well. And with those additions, we now have a great duo in defensive midfield between Thuram and Casemiro. And like I said, we're going to be playing a 4-2-3-1, at least for this first season. We're going to see how it goes, and I have a pretty good feeling that this is going to be the system that will help lead us to glory here at Manchester United throughout this rebuild. But here is the roster, at least the best starting 11 and the best 9 subs that I could come up with here for Manchester United. We've got Andre Onana in net with Thiago Dalot, Rafael Varane, Lisandro Martinez, and Luke Shaw in defense. Casemiro and Khéphren Thuram as the defensive midfielders. Jadon Sancho, Bruno Fernandes, and Marcus Rashford will be joined by Rasmus Højlund up top to form a great foursome. And from the bench, we've got the likes of Gianluca Mancini, Mason Mount, Anthony, Christian Eriksen, Anthony Martial, Alejandro Garnacho, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, Scott McTominay, and Altay Bayindir. So now there's just one thing to do. Let's submit the season and see how season 1 goes. So season 1 is come and gone with Man United, and we see ourselves finish in 3rd place in the Prem, but only 4 points off the top of the table, so we aren't that far off of seeing ourselves at the top of the Premier League again. When it comes to the other competitions, we got knocked out in the quarter-final of the Carabao Cup by Manchester City, the quarter-final of the FA Cup by Leicester City, and when it came to the Champions League, it was a season to forget, as we were in a group of AC Milan, PSG, and Real Sociedad, and saw ourselves finish bottom of that group of death. But all in all, it was a solid first season where we got to see 6 different players scoring double digits, along with 3 of those players ending up getting double-digit assists as well. And one man that really proved to be worth his price tag was Khéphren Thuram, who scored 17 goals in his first season. So overall, pretty solid first season. Can definitely improve. There's still some growing to be done, and thankfully having £81.2 million in the bank to use is going to help us get there even quicker. So transfer business-wise for Season 2, we ended up seeing Thiago Dalot join Chelsea for £32 million, and Rafael Varane will join Al Nassr for £95 million, but 105 total over installments. And to be able to get that amount for a 31-year-old center back, that is pretty nice. Now, when it comes to the ends, we ended up bringing in Amar Dedic for £42 million, which is done through installments. We brought in Manuel Ugarte, who's going to be absolute rock for us in central midfield. It is our future player that will probably take over for Casemiro once he does eventually leave us due to his age. We brought him in for what I believe is £70 million up front and £107 million in total. We brought in the man who I really want to see succeed here, and that is Yukinari Sugawara. He is going to be our replacement for Diogo Dalot and Aaron Wan-Bissaka on that right side, as both him and Amar Dedic can both play at right back. We brought him in for a total of £29.5 million. And after losing players like Victor Lindelof and Rafael Varane, we had to replace them with two other center backs. So we went and got some absolute beasts at that position. The first one was 20-year-old wonder kid, Mr. Ousmane Diomande, who's going to be an absolute machine. We only had to pay £55 million for him. Then the next one is another machine. It is Mr. Giorgio Scalvini, another wonder kid who we bring in from Atalanta, who is totaled at £116 million through installments. But due to doing a lot of business through installments, we still had a lot of money left over. We had around £90 million left, and I was like, all right, what do we spend this on? I decided to spend £63 million and trigger the release clause of Lamine Yamal, the number one wonder kid in the world right now, and he was glad to accept the contract that we gave him, as he will be coming in next season and will be a star player for us. So we'll be rocking the 4-2-3-1 again, and I have plugged in all the players that we have brought in who I deem fit to be in the first 11. But to now have a better look at this first 11 and the best subs off the bench, here we go. We've got Andre Onana in net once again. We've got Yukinari Sugawara, Giorgio Scalvini, Ousmane Diomande, and Luke Shaw in defense. We've got Casemiro and Kefren Turam as our defensive midfielders once again. Jadon Sancho, Bruno Fernandes, Marcus Rashford, and Rasmus Højlund make up that fearsome foursome. We've got Gianluca Mancini, Mason Mount, Anthony, Manuel Ugarte, Amar Dedic, Alejandro Garnacho, Lisandro Martinez, Scott McTominay, and Altay Bayindir off the bench. The side is starting to look scary, sounds scary, and hopefully we are getting that much closer to where we want to be. But now, let's simulate Season 2 and see how we do. Well, in the league, we have gone one spot better and finished in second. However, there is a bigger gap between us and Liverpool, who have now won the league 2 seasons in a row. When it comes to the Carabao Cup, we ended up being eliminated by Leicester City on penalties in the semi-final. We were that close to being able to be in a final already in the Carabao Cup and lifting that once again. When it came to the Champions League, we did alright in the league phase, enough to go through. We had a big win over Salernitana, which was a 6-0 win. We then had to play Marseille in the knockout playoff match, where we ended up beating them over 2 legs by a score of 5-1, but then unfortunately got eliminated by Bayern Munich. Now you'll notice there's one competition I have not brought up yet, and that's the FA Cup. And there's a pretty good reason as to why. We would have a pretty decent run in the FA Cup where we would come up against Crystal Palace in our first match, and we would push them aside by a score of 4-0. In the 4th round, we would come up against Fleetwood, where we would push them aside 4-1. We would then come up against Luton Town, where we would get a goal through Casemiro to get us started, but in the 78th minute, Luton Town would find an equalizer of their own to level the game at 1 apiece, where we would then head to extra time, where Bruno Fernandes would end up netting us a goal in the 98th minute off of an assist from Jadon Sancho. Now after that scare against Luton Town, we would come up against Aston Villa in the quarterfinals, where we would end up brushing them aside 2-0 with a goal from Rasmus Højlund, and this incredible display of ball movement here finished off by Marcus Rashford. We would then see ourselves playing against Newcastle United in the semi-final, where it would be a pretty back and forth game, with Rasmus Højlund getting us the first goal of the match. Then we see Luke Shaw here fighting Manuel Ugarte, who gets a decent deflection, which ends up going down as an own goal against Newcastle. But Newcastle would get one back here through Sebastian Coates to make it 2-1. And here, Guriasi would find Tonali, who ends up taking on the entire team and sliding it past Onana to make it 2-2. But thankfully, we've got Mr. Rasmus Højlund, who right here is going to score the winner in the 87th minute. And that would see us through to our first final. And not just any other final, but a Manchester derby final, where thankfully Jadon Sancho scores against the club that initially released him in his early days of his career, putting us up by a score of 1-0. We see Ousmane Diomande finding Bruno Fernandes, who finds Rasmus Højlund to make it 2-0. But then we go down the other end where Luke Shaw gets a lucky bounce to where it goes to Bruno Fernandes, and we are up 3-1. Jadon Sancho then finds Sugawara, finds Casemiro, who finds Bruno Fernandes to put us up 4-1. And even though we do concede here by a goal from Rooney Bargy, we find ourselves winners of the FA Cup by a score of 4-2 over our bitter rivals Manchester City. So overall, one step closer to where we want to be in the league, and we added the FA Cup. I'm very happy with that. Now, Season 3 business-wise, we would end up moving Scott McTominay to Brentford for $3.3 million, can rise up to $4.2. We would sell Gianluca Mancini to West Ham for $24.5, can rise to $31.5. We would end up selling Bruno Fernandes to Al Ahly in Saudi Arabia for $100 million. We would sell Amad Diallo to Southampton for $7.25 million, where he can rise to $9.5. So on top of what was already a pretty hefty war chest of over £200 million for us, I definitely felt that we needed to improve in two specific positions, that being right back and left back, because recently when teams have done well in the Prem, they have amazing wingbacks. So the first one I went and bought was Jeremy Frimpong for $70 million from Bayer Leverkusen. And the second was Alphonso Davies from Bayern Munich for $107 million. We would then sign Maximus Steve for $32.5 million for some depth at center back. We would sign Santi Jimenez from Feyenoord for $34.5 million, hoping that he can be our next Chicharito. So with all those signings made, and now Lamine Yamal has arrived, we're looking pretty nice for this third season. So here's how we now line up. We've got Andre Onana in net still, Jeremy Frimpong at right back, Giorgio Scalvini and Ousmane Diomande as our center backs, with Alphonso Davies at left back completing the defense, Manuel Ugarte and Kefren Turam as our defensive midfielders, Jadon Sancho, Lamine Yamal, Marcus Rashford, and Rasmus Højlund now make up the foursome. Casemiro, Mason Mount, Anthony, Yukinari Sugawara, Santi Jimenez, Alejandro Garnacho, Lisandro Martinez, Luke Shaw, and Altay Bayındır make up the bench. And like I said last season, I feel like we're getting closer. Now, I really feel like we're building something special. So let's see how we get on here for Season 3. Now, due to us being FA Cup winners last season, we are taking on none other than Liverpool in the FA Community Shield, where hopefully we can come away with a win. And as you can see there, it is already 1-1. But Mr. Rasmus Højlund is going to end up putting us ahead by a goal right here from that set piece. But Mr. Mo Salah is about to equalize it right here from a beautiful shot coming off the wing. However, this game is about to blow wide open, and it's really going to show what this side is going to be capable of not only this season, but in the future, as this game ends up being 6-2, which is absolutely amazing. Now, when it comes to the Carabao Cup, unfortunately, we would get knocked out early by Manchester City on pens, which was actually a 0-0 draw. When it comes to the FA Cup, we would go on an incredible run once again, but fall short in the final to Chelsea, who would trounce us by a score of 4-0. However, in the Champions League, we had a very deep run this time around. In the league phase, we would end up playing the likes of Real Sociedad, PSG, Ajax, Galatasaray, Napoli, Man City, Eindhoven, and Lech Poznan. Thankfully for us, we would go through. We would end up facing the likes of Feyenoord, who we would brush aside 4-2 on aggregate. We would then come up against Bayern Munich, who we would brush aside 5-3 on aggregate. Then we had Aston Villa, brush them aside to get to PSG in the semifinal, where unfortunately we ended up falling just short. And it would have seen us in a Manchester Derby Champions League final, which Man City would go on to win. But now that we've talked about all those competitions, how did the league go? The league was an absolute battle the entire way. There were some games where we were absolutely dominant. I mean, one game we beat West Brom 8-0, as you can see there. We had some other big wins like 6-0 against Sheffield United, 8-1 against Brighton, 6-0 against Nottingham Forest. But the title race came down until the last game of the season. It would either be us winning the league or Liverpool doing a three-peat, which they would be the first club to do a three-peat of Premier League titles since Manchester United did it, completing that in 2008. Our final match of the season saw us playing West Ham United, where we would go down 6 minutes into the game. We were having an absolute nightmare at the Theatre of Dreams, but thankfully to Rasmus Højlund, he scored an absolute beauty to get us back level at 1. Now, Jadon Sancho is going to find Alphonso Davies, who scores a beautiful goal to put us up 2-1. And thankfully here, Sugawara is going to find Luke Shaw. Luke Shaw is going to put it across to Jadon Sancho, who wins us the Premier League title. And due to that Jadon Sancho goal, that put us on 86 points, 2 points clear of Liverpool, even though if we had drawn, we still would have won due to goal differential. Absolutely fantastic season. We ended what could have been a three-peat by Liverpool, and hopefully we can start a little streak of our own now. Here in Season 3, we once again had 6 players scoring double-digit goals, and this time 5 players having double-digit assists. And one of those players that contributed in both with 17 goals and 20 assists was none other than Lamine Yamal. So now with an FA Cup to our name and a Premier League to our name, let's see if we can add some more trophies, shall we? Now, to get the business started in Season 4, we ended up offloading Maximus Steve for £32 million up front, could rise to 35.5, which we made a profit, which we actually make a profit on a lot of the players that we end up buying. Casemiro, offloaded him to Al Nassr for £20 million. Then we had some smaller sales here with Tom Edwards and Harry Radford, who I believe both are new gens. Now on the ends, this is where it gets interesting, because I wanted to bring in some younger players that are going to be able to grow at the side, but also are kind of mentality machines, some players that are going to be in it to win it, want to win. So that led me to Leopold Kjærfeldt, who we bought from Inter Milan for £50 million, who is a physical machine and has a good work rate of 15. I then was looking for another backup center back, so I brought in Jan Arobasek from Wolfsburg for £12.5 million, who is another physical beast. And then being that we lost Casemiro, who was a mentality monster, we had to replace him with a mentality monster, but this is more so a squad depth type of player. We brought in Nicolo Fagioli from Juventus for £30 million. I mean, across the board, super solid player. Cannot wait to see how he contributes to the side. And those actually weren't the only signings. There are some wonder kids that I brought in that will be joining us come January. One is a young Egyptian named Kazim Ergun, who is a striker. I think he's going to be pretty solid. A young Norwegian in Mats Erik Videller. A young Mexican winger in Mitchell Norato. I think this kid's going to be an absolute monster of a player, Mr. Elvis Perez, a young Chilean who at 17 is 6'5" and already has the attributes that make him look like an absolute machine. So hopefully he can hit those heights that his potential says he can. But with those signings made, this is how we now line up. And one thing you probably notice is that Mason Mount is now as the Segunda Volante instead of Kefren Thuram, and there's one big reason as to why. At some point last season, he decided that he absolutely loves football, and he is now a world-class defensive midfielder. So we're going to be playing him alongside Manuel Ugarte and seeing what they can do together. So that leads us to the roster. How is it looking? Well, the starting 11 is the exact same, except Mason Mount is now in there next to Manuel Ugarte. Then on the bench, we've got Lisandro Martinez, Kefren Thuram now, Anthony, Yukinari Sugawara, Santi Jimenez, Leopold Kjærfeldt, Amar Dedic, Nicolo Fagioli, and Altay Bayindir. Our side's looking good. We're still young. We got players hitting their prime. Everyone is working together. I think we have exactly what we need to back it up and go again this year and hopefully win another Premier League title. So now, let's see how we do within Season 4. This time in the Community Shield, things were a little bit different. We ended up losing on penalties to Chelsea. In the Carabao Cup, we would have a decent run until we met Liverpool in the semi-final, where they would trounce us in the first leg 5-1. We would only draw 2-2 in the second leg. When it came to the FA Cup, we would once again get to the final, brushing aside teams like Man City, Brighton, and Tottenham, but falling to Chelsea by a score of 2-1. When it came to the Champions League, we were absolutely dominant in the league phase, where we would end up getting some decent draws in our favor, but we would end up losing to young boys of all the teams out of all of them. We would play Dortmund, Leipzig, Juve, Porto, and Villa, and we lost to young boys. Don't know how that happened, but it did. In the round of 16, we would face off against AS Monaco, where we would beat them 7-2 on aggregate. We would then come up against Arsenal, where we would beat them 3-1 on aggregate, which saw us get to the semifinal against Bayern Munich, where we would lose to them 5-0 on aggregate, not scoring a single goal in either leg. But when it came to the Premier League, how did we do there? Well, we ended up having a game against Middlesbrough this season, where we absolutely annihilated them 11-1, and Rasmus Højlund would score 6 goals by himself. It was an absolute demolition job. And in our final game of the season, we would come up against Southampton, where Lamine Yamal and Giorgio Scalvini would both end up bagging themselves braces, as we end up doing a demolition job again of beating them 7-0, which is absolutely insane. And those are just 2 big-time results that helped us on the way to repeating as Premier League champions and finishing on 92 points by scoring 114 goals as well, which is pretty good. We would once again have 6 players scoring double-digit goals, and Mason Mount scoring 29, with Yamal and Rashford both scoring 25. And we would also this time have 6 players with double-digit assists. 2 of those being Marcus Rashford having 21 and Lamine Yamal having 19. So that now makes it back-to-back Premier League titles, and in Season 5, we have an opportunity to do what no one has done since 2007-2008, and the last club to do so was none other than Manchester United. So can we go on in Season 5 and repeat once again and try and match history? This time around, business-wise, there was actually very little done in the outgoings and incomings. A majority of our business would be loaning players out. One of them being Derek Kingsley, who is actually a product of one of our youth intakes, who's looking pretty good. We loaned him out to Rangers. Elvis Perez, who is that Chilean wonder kid, we loaned him out to Universidad Católica, who is his original side. He's looking absolutely fantastic so far. We also loaned out Aro Bisek to Tottenham because he wanted playing time, and Alejandro Garnacho to Leicester City as he wanted playing time as well. Now on the ends, we would bring in another wonder kid in Keisuke Ueno from Gamba Osaka, who we actually loaned him back to so that he can get some playing time. Even though he's only 5'9", he can't play left back, right back, and center back, so he's kind of like our Japanese version of Lisandro Martinez. And then on a free, we brought in a man who knows how to win and some good depth at center back because he only wanted to be squad player. We brought in Presnel Kimpembe, the former center back of Paris Saint-Germain. So with that really being the only business that we have done, this is how the starting 11 looks. And as we can see, it is the exact same all the way down to 2 players. Presnel Kimpembe now finds himself as a decent bench option for us. And Daniel Gore, who is actually a wonder kid who starts the save at Manchester United, but is just now getting into the side at the age of 22. So we'll see what he can do as a bench option for us. But here we are at Season 5. Let's see how we do. We're going for 3. So being that we've won the league back-to-back seasons, we find ourselves in the Community Shield again, and it's against Chelsea again, and they beat us again. But this time only by a score of 1-0. We didn't have to go to extra time and go to pens. Now when it comes to the Carabao Cup, we once again had an incredible run in the Carabao Cup, beating the likes of Arsenal, Brentford, Aston Villa, and Man City over 2 legs to get to the final, where we would once again come up against Chelsea, and they would once again beat us by a score of 2-1. For whatever reason, we just could not win the Carabao Cup. And when it came to the Champions League in the league phase, we would not lose a single game. We would even trounce Rosenborg by a score of 7-0. When it came to the round of 16, we ended up being eliminated by Juventus. So that brings us to 2 competitions, the FA Cup and the Premier League. How do we do in those? Well, for the FA Cup, we would end up actually having a pretty easy run. We would end up beating Cardiff by a score of 4-1, Preston 4-0, Newcastle 2-0, Burnley 4-1, and that would see us in the FA Cup semi-final against Brighton and Hove Albion, where in the first couple of minutes, Daniel Gore got himself on the scoreboard and got us on the scoreboard, putting us up 1-0, where we would actually have an absolute demolition job once again by beating Brighton Hove Albion 6-0 in the semi-final of the FA Cup, which is just very, very surprising to where you win 6-0 in a semi-final. And that would set up a Manchester derby once again in the FA Cup final, where Lamine Yamal would get us on the board early, putting us up 1-0. But being that Manchester City have a robot that plays for them named Erling Haaland, of course he was going to find a way to score a goal as well, leveling it at 1-1. However, we kind of have a freak of nature of our own. Anthony is going to find Ugarte, who is going to have an absolute blast of a goal. And that would see us win our second FA Cup. And I am so glad I spent so much money on this dude. He's an absolute beast. Now that brings us to the Premier League title. The Premier League title race came down to the final game of the season between us and the noisy neighbors Manchester City. They would end up beating us by a score of 2-0 the final week before the end of the season. But Man City had Chelsea and we had Brentford. And thankfully for us, we had a man named Rasmus Højlund, who absolutely dominated this game, scoring a wonderful goal off of an amazing assist from Anthony there. But we also have another player named Lamine Yamal, who is also very, very good and is about to score right there. And we also have some other players that are pretty good, like a man who I highlighted previously in the last match, Mr. Manuel Ugarte, who is an absolute beast and bags himself a brace this game, as we are going to go on to win this game by a score of 6-1, as Brentford are about to score right here, and we would end up doing the three-peat for the first time since 07-08, being that we were the last club to be able to do it as well, which is absolutely fantastic. So there we have it, 82 points, won it by 3 over Man City, as they would lose by a score of 3-0 to Chelsea. And we would end up scoring 99 goals this season as well. This time around, we'd only have 5 players scoring double-digit goals, but once again have 6 players with double-digit assists. One of those players, once again, being Lamine Yamal, who at 20 years of age, is probably one of the top 3 players in the world. And 2 players that I want to highlight really quickly, because they've been just absolutely fantastic throughout this whole rebuild. One of them is Marcus Rashford, who has been absolutely fantastic and is now less than 50 goals away from tying Bobby Charlton's goal record at Manchester United, and has solidified himself in the icons list. And the other is Jadon Sancho, who just the entire time was super consistent, bagging goals, getting assists, just being the player that I needed him to be. He was the Dortmund version of Jadon Sancho this entire time, which is absolutely fantastic to see. So what's everything that we have accomplished in this Manchester United rebuild? We've won 3 Premier League titles, 2 FA Cups, 1 Community Shield, that's 6 trophies in 5 years, along with 6 runners-up as we finished a 2nd in the Prem. We were runners-up twice in the FA Cup, runners-up once in the Carabao Cup, and 2-time runners-up in the Community Shield. So getting 6 trophies in 5 years, while going to multiple other finals and being in another title race as well on top of it, being in a title race 4 out of the 5 seasons, that's absolutely fantastic. We have the best wonder kid in the world, who's now a top 3 player in the world as well, to help lead this club forward. Marcus Rashford at 30 years old is closing in on history here at Manchester United. And we have players like Elvis Perez, and Derek Kingsley, who are ready for their opportunities come next season when you guys take over here at Manchester United. So with that being said, I hope that you guys enjoyed today's video. If you guys wish to carry on this rebuild, I'll be linking my Discord down below in the description where you guys will be able to take the download file, put it in your FM yourselves, and carry this save on, and hopefully continue to win more trophies for Manchester United. If you guys did enjoy, please feel free to hit that like, comment, and subscribe. Subscribing is 100% free, so when I hit that sub button. Also, why not check out my previous rebuild that I did with AFC Ajax, which will be on screen right now. Oh, also, one more thing. The Glazers are finally looking to leave. How about that?